Welcome to Hope Starts With Us, a podcast by NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I'm your guest host, Jennifer Snow, NAMI's National Director of Government Relations and Policy. We started this podcast because we believe that hope starts with us. Hope starts with us talking about mental health. Hope starts with us making information accessible. Hope starts with us providing resources and practical information. Hope starts with us sharing our stories. Hope starts with us breaking the stigma. If you or your loved one is struggling with a mental health condition and have been looking for hope, we made this podcast for you. Hope starts with all of us. Hope is a collective, and we hope that each episode with each conversation brings you into that collective so you know that you are not alone. Today I'm joined by Traute Winters, the Executive Director of NAMI Greater Los Angeles County. Before joining NAMI, Traute worked with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention as an area director, developing educational programs, advocating for public policies at the state and federal levels, and providing support and resources for those affected by suicide. Now Traute is working with NAMI in the Los Angeles area, continuing to advocate for increased mental health access. At NAMI, suicide prevention is, of course, an area we focus on, along with our goals of getting people help early and finding the best possible care. During our conversation, we'll talk about Traute's journey to mental health advocacy, suicide prevention, seasonal depression, and how we can combat loneliness, especially around the holidays. So Traute, your professional dedication to mental health and specifically suicide prevention is clear, with 6 years at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention and your leadership at NAMI in Los Angeles for the past 3 years. Can you share with our audience what brought you here? How did you choose to work in mental health advocacy?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. 10 years ago, when I was looking for a new position, I saw a job opening at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and suicide and mental health to me seemed like a very important topic that I could get passionate about. When you work in mental health, you want to be passionate about the cause. And, like many of the folks that work at NAMI and the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, we have a connection to mental health. Growing up, my parents had a close family member that died by suicide, and I have a sister who lost her brother-in-law and son both to suicide. So you see suicide can run in families. And my husband's family also has a lot of family members that struggle with their mental health.
That personal story is what brings so many of us to this work.
Right.
And keeps our passion going, especially on the days when it's challenging.
Yeah.
These days, it can feel like things are changing so rapidly. I know I've seen and experienced a major shift in the conversations around mental health. Over your decade of work in this field, what have you learned, either about mental health or suicide prevention?
I've learned that suicide can be preventable, mental health is treatable, and when the pandemic hit, it really elevated the conversation around mental health. And so many people now have family members or themselves are struggling. There's the awareness throughout our whole country that we're all impacted by mental health right now. So in the last 10 years, I've really seen a shift in the stigma. People are willing to talk about it, address it, seek help. We still have a long way to go, but there's so many exciting developments in mental health right now. I think Congress is really supporting mental health legislation. In my state of California, we're seeing unprecedented mental health legislation, and people are starting to really learn more about mental health and suicide prevention. With suicide prevention, I think it's important for people to really learn the risk factors and the warning signs. Suicide can run in families. The Hemingway family has had 8 suicides. So that's one of the risk factors. Also, if someone had an abusive childhood or a traumatic life event like a divorce can contribute to suicide. But it's not just one thing that contributes to suicide, it's a multitude of factors. And so it's also important that we all learn the risk factors. And if someone's in imminent danger, that can be expressed by they may be talking about, feeling overwhelmed or that they don't want to live anymore. They may have behavior that's unusual for them, like giving away prized possessions. So we need to take notice when people are struggling, especially over a period of 2 weeks or more. If someone, does exhibit some of these warning signs, it's time to have a conversation with them and really reach out. And it's really exciting now because we have the 988 Mental Health and Suicide Prevention Lifeline. So even if someone isn't sure what to do, how to help someone, they can call 988 and get information how to help someone, or they can call with someone to 988.
Yes.
And that's a really exciting development in mental health, that we have that resource so that people can get the help and support they need. We don't want to call 911 unless there is potentially, a dangerous situation for people. Mental health crisis deserves a mental health response. So 988 is a really exciting development with mental health.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. A mental health crisis deserves a mental health response, and 988 has been such a game changer for that. I know I personally think about it in the context of someone who, maybe it's 3 o'clock in the morning and they're not feeling well. And even if you have a great support network, you might not want to pick up the phone that late and call people that are in your network. And now there is that 988 available to you if you need it.
Right.
So this episode of Hope Starts With Us will air in November. As winter creeps in, our daylight hours are growing shorter. I know that at that time of year, it's always a change. It's different than when it's the middle of the summer and you've got bright lights all around and everyone seems to be alive and moving. I know you're based out of California, but do you have any advice for those who might experience seasonal depression?
Yes, and I actually suffer from that myself. I grew up in Chicago, and I remember the winter months really having those feelings of being blue. And now living in California, people think California sunshine, but I live near the beach and we have what's called May gray and June gloom, where we'll have days on end without any sunshine. And so I do still feel those symptoms. And it's important to recognize, those symptoms are temporary, be compassionate with yourself. Some of those things that can help, with seasonal affective disorder or light therapy, talk therapy, medication if you need it as well, which I, am on a low-level antidepressant. I'm not afraid to take that medication and really look at what works for me to combat that.
Absolutely. It's so important for us all to figure out what works for us, because that's what's most important in this whole conversation.
Right.
And I have to say, I didn't know about June gloom. I didn't know that was a dynamic. So you sometimes are dealing with it at a different time of year than many of the other people are in different parts of the country.
Right.
Fascinating. Well, and as we know, in some places across the United States, the winter months are a time when there are not only do you have less sunshine, but there are fewer opportunities, fewer activities, fewer times when you can connect with people. And at a time when we're experiencing a loneliness epidemic, as our Surgeon General, Dr. Murthy, says, what are some ways that we can combat those feelings of loneliness?
Yeah, there's so many things that we can do. And again, it's to be kind with yourself, recognize your feelings, know that those are only going to be temporary, but also to reach out and connect with others. So there's so many things we can do, become active on social media. There's meetup groups out there. Myself, I recently connected, I speak German, and I connected with a German meetup group.
Oh.
My church that I go to has started to recognize, that loneliness is a factor and people want that connection. So they're starting different groups based on people's areas of interest. So it's important to really be proactive and connect with others, whether it's your friends, think about what your hobbies or passions or interests are. A really big area too is to volunteer. And that's a great way, with something you're interested in. And of course, NAMI's always looking for volunteers with all of our chapters across the country. And we like to say we're a NAMI family. So, really getting involved with other organizations, whether it's through a meetup group or volunteering. And one of the things we recognized in Los Angeles County, we're so spread out. We did a little bit of research about how to reach the under 30 population, and they, are also struggling with that loneliness and isolation, and probably the most impacted by the pandemic. So we created a Friends of NAMI group, and we meet monthly, and we host different speakers. We do different topics. We're organizing meetup hikes and things like that. So, just really reaching out to try to connect with a different organization or group, or, NAMI, we welcome all to, be a part of our organization and volunteer.
We sure do. Well, and I'm wondering if someone that's listening is in the Los Angeles area, how can they get connected up and become a friend of NAMI?
Oh, we'd love to have people in the Los Angeles area join, and they can go to NAMIGLAC, NAMIGLAC.org. And we have a volunteer interest form. Our phone number is there as well. And we have various chapters across Los Angeles County, and we'd love to connect people with their area.
That's wonderful. It's wonderful. So, Traute, I couldn't help but notice that you say that you speak German, and I know my German relatives would be very happy to hear that. I have to wonder, do you know how to say hope starts with us when it comes to in German?
Yes, Hoffnung beginnt mit uns.
Hoffnung, oh, wow, that's wonderful. Oh, I love hope starts with us can go international now. Yes. So, Traute, I know that you're very involved in legislative efforts and public policy efforts to help increase access to care for people with mental health conditions. And California often leads the way on expanding access to care. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about some of the efforts that are happening in California.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. There's 3 pieces of legislation that have passed in California. Governor Newsom, our governor, is very pro mental health and finding treatment and support for people who live with mental illness. We have many people on our streets in California, also in Los Angeles County. So this new legislation is designed to get those people into treatment, into supportive housing. So one of the pieces of legislation is called the CARE Act, and it's for family members, hospitals, law enforcement who can petition for people who are in the street living with psychosis. So a psychotic disorder like schizophrenia or bipolar, and getting them into treatment. And it's a 1-year program, which can be extended 2 years. And it's designed to get people into comprehensive treatment. So mental health support, housing, and really to get them back to competency so they can live a fulfilling life. So that's really exciting. It's started in LA County December 1st, and we work very closely with our Department of Mental Health on educating our members about that legislation. And it's really designed to help families whose loved ones are on the streets and really need that mental health support. Another piece of legislation that passed is Proposition 1, which the voters in California voted on and approved. And that's going to start in 2026. And we're going to see a lot of dollars. It's a $5.6 billion bond. A lot of new housing is going to be built through that bond. And, during the Reagan areas, a lot of the mental health hospitals were closed, and we lost a lot of housing. The states were supposed to take over and build new mental health housing and facilities, but that didn't happen. So this is designed now to bring additional housing at all continuum levels of care because we don't have housing in LA County and across the country, enough housing at different levels of care. So that's really exciting that we're going to start to build, new treatment facilities and have supportive housing for people who are seriously mentally ill. And then the third piece of legislation is around conservatorship laws and updating that, which hadn't been updated in about 50 years. And also with these three pieces of legislation, substance use disorder is now part of it. So it's mental health or substance use disorder. And we know so many people have co-occurring disorders, and it's been treated very separately by our counties and, within our states. And so now that's being combined under one umbrella, which is exciting so that people can get treated for co-occurring disorders. And, we're really looking at things from a comprehensive standpoint.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. A comprehensive standpoint being such an important element, because too often our treatment is siloed and people aren't looked at holistically.
Yes.
And I know you and I have talked about this before, but housing is such a critical piece. I know when I'm talking with NAMI leaders around the country, it's often one of the first issues they raise as being a challenge.
Right. And step up and step down housing too, because so many people are put on a suicide hold, 72-hour suicide hold, and then they're released when in fact, they may need additional support a month in a treatment center, and there just isn't that availability of step downs or step up housing. And so, hopefully this will help address that.
Oh, that sounds great. And you said it started in December.
The CARE Act started in December in our county, yes, and it's being rolled out within all the counties in California.
Wow. And I'm curious, was it controversial? Well, I know you said that the voters voted on it, so at least had a majority.
On Proposition 1, they voted on the CARE Act that was passed by the California legislature. And initially, the language was more around mandatory treatment, but then a lot of advocacy groups advocated against that. So it isn't mandatory, but there are systems in place where peer support specialists can be part of the team to really encourage people to get that help and to get the voluntary treatment.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And it's kind of the step before conservatorship is how our county describes it.
Can you say a little bit more about how the peer support specialists are involved? Because I know that they're such a critical component to a care team. I'd love to hear how they're involved in some ways this new initiative.
Yeah, and I think that's a really exciting development in mental health as well, is folks with lived experience are being trained as peer support specialists. And we just started a training program with NAMI California in the state to train people as peer support specialists. So now many of our treatment centers, our county with the new CARE Act is going to hire peer support specialists to work alongside mental health professionals. So who's someone going to listen to? Someone with that lived experience who's been there before. And I think it's a really exciting development with mental health. And our county last year hired a chief peer support officer, which is really exciting to help bring people into full-time positions as peer support specialists.
Wow, a chief peer support officer. That is amazing. As California oftentimes leads the way, that's the first I've heard of a position in the C-suite, recognizing the importance. Because, as you said, people want to talk with someone who can relate to their own experiences.
Yes.
And certainly the research shows that the outcomes are better when peers are involved in the conversation. I know we spoke a little bit about 988 at the beginning of the conversation. I'm curious, in Los Angeles, while 988, the trained crisis counselor can help someone de-escalate in a given situation.
Mhm.
But in a small number of cases, needing an in-person response is often needed.
Mhm.
Has Los Angeles done anything around mobile crisis teams to be
Yes.
able to help individuals?
Yes, we have. And we're very fortunate in LA County to have an organization, Dee Dee Hirsch. They actually started the Suicide Prevention Lifeline years ago, and they run 988 for our region, for a
Okay.
good part of Southern California. And they work closely also with our Department of Mental Health.
Mm.
And as of December of last year, we have I think it's over 50 now, crisis mobile response teams and they've gone 24/7 as of December
Oh, wow.
last year. We have 10 million people in LA County, so the need is great, but that was something that our chapter advocated heavily for, was for our county to have 24/7 mobile crisis response teams, because we know people can have a mental health crisis in the middle of the night. And, we need to have that 24/7. So we're probably one of the counties that are the most advanced in terms of how we respond to 988 and how robust our services are.
Oh my good. It really does sound like you are leading the way. And I know that we work advocating in a lot of other places where, even if having one mobile crisis van or unit is an achievement. So it's amazing that you've already gotten to the point of having 24/7 coverage.
Yes.
Bravo. I know it was not easy to get that, and I'm sure it was a large part of your
Yes,
advocacy.
especially because we know there's a shortage of mental health professionals. So it is difficult. Our county has normally about a 25 to sometimes 30% vacancy with mental health professionals, and they have worked with other third-party organizations to contract out for these mobile crisis response teams.
Wow. And are peer support specialists at all involved in the
Yes.
mobile crisis
Yes.
teams? Okay.
Yes, yeah, and yeah, that's exciting. Even with our law enforcement in some of our cities, they now have mental health professionals riding along with the officers and or peer support specialists as well.
Wonderful. Again, someone that can really relate to the experiences that someone might be going through. It's just such a best practice to help people have a mental health response to that mental health crisis and not a law enforcement response. Well, before we conclude, I'd like to ask you a question that we ask every guest. The world can be a difficult place, and sometimes it's hard to hold on to hope. That's why in each episode, we dedicate the last couple of minutes of our podcast to a special segment called Hold On to Hope. So, Traute, can you tell us what helps you hold on to hope?
Yeah, what helps me hold on to hope is knowing that, when I'm feeling down, that life is cyclical, right? That, things are going to pass. And, I think what we're going through in our country right now can be difficult for many of us. But it's cyclical. We know that things will get better. When you look through history, things are always up and down. So I like to hold on to hope that the future is always going to be brighter. I think the future of mental health is brighter with, now in Congress, we have our mental health caucus that recently started in the Senate, and there's bipartisan support around mental health. So I think the future of mental health is really exciting, and all the initiatives that are coming through the legislation and the advancement of peer support specialists really gives me hope for a brighter future for those impacted by mental health conditions.
The future is bright. The perfect way. Perfect sentiment. Well, Traute, thank you so much for being here with me today. One thing that gives me hope is talking with the people in NAMI's community and being reminded that we're all in this work together and making a difference for mental health access in all that we do. I really appreciate this conversation with you.
Me too. Thank you so much.
This has been Hope Starts With Us, a podcast by NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. If you're looking for mental health resources, you are not alone. To connect with NAMI Helpline and find local resources, visit nami.org/help. You can also text Helpline to 62640. That's 62640. Or dial 1-800-950-NAMI 6264. If you are experiencing an immediate suicide, substance use, or mental health crisis, please call or text 988 to speak with a trained crisis support specialist or visit 988lifeline.org. I'm Jennifer Snow. Thank you for listening, and be well.